cuts off the beginning of my recording.
They do.
And I'll say hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for yet another session of our live coaching calls. It's Thursday. It's 11:30 a.m. Mountain, so it's 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, and we do this every single week. And we'd love for you to join us live. This is available to all of our members. The more people that show up, the better, I think, because it kind of helps with the interaction. With me, as always, is our community manager and really kind of the brains and the brawn behind Needle Marketing, Deneen Goncalves. Deneen, thanks for being here as always.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me.
And Deneen was just telling me that in Minneapolis, where she's sitting, it's 2 degrees. Did I make that up? 4 degrees?
Yeah, 2, but I'm going to forget about today. And tomorrow it's supposed to be 30. So whatever.
Okay.
Tomorrow 30, and that is like balmy in Minnesota. So.
Well, I'm rooting for you.
Yeah. It'll be good.
Awesome. As everybody should know, I think if you're new to this, I'll say that if you're joining us live and you want to ask questions, we're broadcasting live on Facebook, but we don't monitor those questions. So if you want to interact with us, please come over to Easy Webinar. You can just go to needlemarketing.com/coaching, and there's a chat pane on the right-hand side. And feel free to ask any questions that you want. You can ask questions, offer suggestions. If you have ideas, you can heckle us. So if there's something that you want to say that's rude or derogatory, feel free to lob it in the chat pane, and we'll try our best to respond. Just kidding. Today we're talking about maybe one of the most important topics we can talk about for our members who are trying to grow their schools, and that's what we in the digital marketing realm called lead qualification. And I don't know what to call it for Montessorians. Deneen and I were playing with the nomenclature, and we haven't come up with anything perfect, unless, Deneen, you had an idea between our last conversation and now.
No, but maybe our members will, as we continue to talk about it. Maybe they have a specific name for it that we're missing.
Yeah, that's a contest. If anybody comes up with the name for this, you're going to win a prize. I don't know what it is yet, but it'll be great. And here's why I don't like lead qualification for Montessorians is because I don't like thinking of our parent prospects as leads. Because I feel like a lead is a thing that you beat up until money comes out. And our parents are people that we're trying to help. And so I'll be calling it prospect qualification, maybe, for lack of a better term, until we get somewhere more semantically appropriate. But the short version is this: somebody has engaged with you online, and in the world of digital marketing and sales, any amount of engagement is considered a lead. And there's multiple layers of this. So there's marketing qualified lead, sales accepted lead, sales qualified lead. And the way that people phrase that tends to be a little bit different. But when you have an initial lead, it's anybody who's expressed interest, who you have the ability to reach out to. This is true even if you don't have their contact information. And I'm saying in the realm of traditional marketing. So if I find out, wow, Deneen Goncalves read my blog, that's a lead. I know who it is, I know what she did, and I know that intrinsically qualifies her as interested. So now I can reach out to her on LinkedIn or try to do skip tracing and contact her. Now, we're not going to do that in the Montessori space, but I want to make very clear what marketers think leads are. And this is important for you to have, Mr. and Mrs. Montessorian, because you have to interface with us. And it's important that we're all able to connect the dots. So if somebody comments on your Facebook post, you're going to get people that say, oh, that was a lead. And you're going to say, no, it's not. It's not a lead because I want somebody in my school right now today who's asking me qualified questions. And these are the bridges that we have to gap. Or the gaps we have to bridge. I messed that one up, didn't I? Yeah, but I got there. And so when your marketing team says, this is a lead, and you say, no, that's a lead, what's really important is, and I'm not going to argue either point because I see merit to both. What I will say, though, is you need to get on the same page, regardless of who you're working with or how you're performing this process. You need to make sure that what you think a mission appropriate prospect is matches what whoever's producing this traffic thinks it is, because that key performance indicator is one of the most important key performance indicators you have. And if the things that they're counting and the things that you're counting are misaligned, you're always going to be at odds. And they're going to be optimizing against the wrong things, and you're going to be laboring under misapprehensions or misconceptions, excuse me. So the very first note I will offer is make sure that everyone's on the same page as far as what a lead is. I think that a first name and an email address is a subscriber. That's what I'll say to Montessorians. I think if you have a first name and an email address, I won't call it a lead yet. I'll call it a subscriber. I think that if somebody downloads tuition information, I'll call that a hot subscriber. Maybe not a lead just yet, but for me and for what I know about Montessorians and having worked with Montessori schools now for a couple of years, I'll say that I think a tour is a lead. And I want to pause there, Deneen, and make sure I haven't said anything that's too confusing, and also that you agree with where I am so far.
Yeah, no, I think that makes absolute sense. So I'm hoping that when we think about leads and tours, what can we do to get those leads or to position those leads to be the most possible to transition into an enrollment? Can we chat a little bit about how that can look, or what your
Yes,
thoughts
definitely.
are?
Definitely. And as we do that, I'd like to say that sometimes I think I misspoke a little bit. I think the digital facet of a lead is probably a tour, somebody who goes on Calendly and schedules. I think the analog facet of a lead is somebody who calls you and asks mission qualified questions. So if somebody calls you and says, hey, I have a 3-year-old, check. We're interested in, some alternative to whatever your value proposition is. I believe that in my mind as a marketer and as somebody who is now intimately acquainted with the Montessori marketing process, I think that qualifies as a lead. And so we have a family with a child that is asking qualified questions either over the phone, over email, or there at your school. And again, I know this is a subtle nuances, but I think it's important for us to all get on the same page with. Now, to jump directly to your question, one of the things that gets really frustrating for our members, and this sounds like a really good problem to have, and good problems to have are only good for like 48 hours. Like you're gonna be like, oh my goodness, we can't handle all of these tours. And that's a great place to be for 2 days. And then you hate me. And I've seen this happen. We saw this happen with Matt. When I started working with Matt, I was his favorite person for about a period of 48 hours. And then after that, he was like distinctly annoyed. And there were growing pains that he didn't know how to deal with in the beginning. And I shouldn't say didn't know how to deal with, because I think he handled them with grace and elegance to a degree that I never would have been able to do. But for instance, we were driving tours into his school at such a rate that his no-show rate went through the roof. The people that came to his schools were not qualified in many cases. And remember, these are people that are going to Google and saying, hey, I'm interested in a Montessori school potentially. And they land on our landing page that says Montessori school. So we're doing what we can to pre-qualify them with content. But no matter what happens and no matter how good your marketer is, anytime you increase the number of anything, you get a certain level of dilution. If you're getting 10 tours a month, let's say, I bet you 10% of them aren't mission appropriate. Well, if we increase that from 10 to 100, that 10% number feels so much bigger because it's costing you so much more time, even though in aggregate you haven't really, your ratio isn't going down at all. You're having to deal with that problem more and more and more and more. So what Matt decided to do was multifold. It was a multivariate problem, so he had a multivariate solution. The first one that I thought was a little tedious but necessary is he had his director of admissions reach out to people who were scheduling tours almost right away. So Sylvia, who's brilliant, by the way. Oh, Janine, Sylvia should be a guest speaker.
Yeah.
We already talked about that? Okay.
No, we haven't, but I love her. I know her personally. She's pretty great.
Yeah, she's amazing. Can you put her on the list? I'd love to get her on and just talk about how she does what she does. Sorry. Quick tangent. Squirrel. So Sylvia, the minute tour was scheduled, Sylvia would reach out, and she would reach out under the guise of just confirming the dates and times. And she'd say, hey, we're testing this new system, Calendly, and people are scheduling online, and I just want to make sure that my system matches up with what you have. But really what she's doing is she's calling to make sure that you're not a psychopath, because some of the parents can be that. And then she might ask some pointed questions like, oh, tell me a little bit more about your son or daughter and what you're looking for and where you're coming from. And she would use that as an opportunity to pre-qualify. And this was a really important step for them, because before she started doing that, they had all these people coming to the school that, in 7 seconds, they could have figured out, like, gosh, you're actually really, really not a fit. What it is that you want or need doesn't align with what it is that we offer. And now, because we're not impolite humans, I have to walk through this whole hour-long tour process with you, which I think could probably, I've never done it, but I just imagine that could just be soul-sucking. You're like walking through the motions and showing off your school to this person that like, not only am I not the right solution for you, but I really don't want you here. And Deneen, I bet you maybe have gone through that a little bit.
I have. Yeah, I have. And it's disheartening, actually for both parties, because you're like, here's this amazing thing I want to show you, but I also know that you're looking for 2 days a week and we only offer 5 days a week. So I'm going to continue to show you this amazing thing, but we still are not the right fit for you.
Right.
And, there are some ways where you could there's still selling opportunities in that process, but it's less likely. If they've got if you have a stay-at-home mom who works part-time, and she is truly only looking for 2 days a week, that's it. But there might be opportunities there. But it is kind of like, okay, here we go. But it's good practice too.
Sure. Well, and I think you just brought up something that I think is really important. Oftentimes we get, especially when marketing works, sales gets complacent. And I see this in industries, high pressure industries, like we work in the real estate investment vertical. And what we have found is when a specific geography begins to perform really well, our salespeople stop following up. And then when that geography softens, the salespeople are now soft themselves and have no follow-up procedure, and they have no pipeline because they were used to just closing the deals that were ready to close. So there's a very fine line between qualifying a prospect and ignoring prospects that just need to be nurtured. And Deneen, I think you brought up just a brilliant point, which is know what your deal breakers are. So, hey, we do 5 days. That's what we do. And if you need 2 days, that is a distinct no-go. Now, that's a deal breaker. However, there might be things that are misaligned, but not necessarily deal breakers. I think tuition is one of them. I think sometimes parents get a little sticker shock, but if you can really paint the picture as to why you're so much more valuable than the alternative, I believe that is a hurdle that can be jumped. So, I'm not saying to not present your tuition. That's actually something else that Matt does. Matt has a nurture sequence specifically for tours. So somebody schedules a tour, and then they automatically start getting dripped on until that tour. And one of the things he sneaks in there is, if in case you haven't downloaded it already, we offer our tuition documents online, but this might be something you're interested in, and this will help prepare you for any questions you want to ask us during the tour. And he says that people will read the tuition and be like, oh my goodness, and jump ship. And I think if somebody jumps ship after seeing your tuition, chances are the chasm is just too broad. If they've gone all the way, from awareness to consideration to intent to scheduling a tour, they've gone all the way down your sales funnel, they've scheduled with you, and then your tuition is the thing that scares them off. That to me is probably what you want to have happen. Where it's a little disappointing, because you did all this work and you paid for this prospect and you paid for the traffic. If it's your tuition rates that scare them off so much to where they're not even willing to say, okay, let's just go in here and see what's going on, then either A, you haven't done a good job presenting your value with content, which is something we'll talk about, or B, it really is just too big a gulf. It's too big a divide. Have I said anything, Deneen, that you think is inappropriate?
No, I think this is exactly how it should go. I'm curious, though, to know your insight on what are some things that we can do to bring in those mission appropriate, or at least what steps can we take before the tour actually happens? And you already talked about, giving your tuition, really carving out what are some no-goes that don't work with your program. Are there any other things that we can do to make sure that we're finding those families and not really, ultimately, for lack of a better term, like wasting our time with families that just won't fit?
Yeah, I think the phone call is really important. I don't think Sylvia does that anymore because we ended up with another gulf where we had so many leads that they ended up being cumbersome, and then so she followed up with all of them, and then we leveled up again, and we had so many leads that she couldn't follow up with all of them. So Matt started to solve that problem with email nurtures. For our smaller schools that don't necessarily have that problem yet, I think that initial phone call is probably going to be the most important thing you can do. I think if somebody schedules, pick up the phone and call them. And I talk sometimes about maintaining continuity with the narrative. So if somebody emails you, email them back, don't call them, because when somebody emails me, if I email somebody and they call me, I think they're creepy. Like they're breaking the conversational etiquette that we have established. My dad does this sometimes to me. I will text him and he will call me, and I'm like, Dad, you don't know how the universe functions. I believe that rule can be broken when you now have a date set in the future and you and I have a contract that exists some way, because you have an excuse to say, hey, I just thought it would be a little bit easier. I don't want to waste your time. I thought it'd be a little bit easier for us to confirm. And by the way, just so you know, and through that conversation, I think that might be the most important thing small schools can do. The second thing that I would offer up is have your, like the things you need to know document that goes out, and it goes out automatically. So, and you don't even have to veil this, I don't believe. I think you can be pretty upfront with what it is that you're doing. Hey, Deneen, thank you so much for scheduling a tour. I'm so excited to see you. I'm really proud of everything that we've been able to accomplish here at Bergamo Montessori. Just so you know, some of the things that have been deal breakers for parents that have scheduled tours in the past are listed below. If any one of these strikes you as something that you just can't live with, I completely understand. I'm actually presenting it here to you now because I don't want to waste your time and I want to be respectful of you and your needs. Now, if some of these things just strike you as odd or you don't understand, come on in because I'm going to explain to you why they're critically important. But if you come across anything on my bullet pointed list that just doesn't gel with you, then we're probably not the right fit. And you know what? People love that. In sales, they actually call it the takeaway. Anytime we come and say, hey, we might not be the right fit, people lean in. That's just natural human disposition because we all want what we can't have, sadly. So, and I'm not telling you to do it as an active takeaway, but what I am telling you is don't be afraid. You're not going to scare away your prospects. As a matter of fact, I think parents are going to appreciate the fact that you're being bold, you're being transparent, you're being upfront, and you're a thought leader. And that's what they want. One of the things that I think is maybe potentially the biggest fail point with our Montessori members is you're so humble about how brilliant you are. And I'm not trying to pander. I'm actually a little mad about it. Like I listen to some of our Montessorians speak and it's like, oh, you're brilliant. And you need to not take a back seat to things. You need to let people know, hey, here's why we do what we do. And here's what we know. This is the scientific method talking. We know we're better than everybody else and we're willing to state it. And part of that is saying, this is who we fit for and this is who we don't. And so I think establishing yourself as a thought leader requires you and enables you to sort of present some of those prerequisites. It's going to be different for every school. I would love to see this in video because now they're getting to know you. You're branding yourself a little bit. They get to see your face. They get to hear your voice. And some of this messaging that might come across as caustic in written word, depending on how they choose to interpret it, if you can say it the way that I just said it now, I think that seemed pretty friendly to me. Hopefully you agree. Dinian, how did I do? Am I answering your question? I feel like I'm maybe dancing around it a little bit, but I'm getting there.
No, and that's actually, I'm happy that we're talking about this because I'm thinking about the conversation we had with Peter last week. And he talked so much about how important it is to build that relationship on the tour. And then I asked him the question of what are some things that we could do prior to that tour to help build that relationship, which again, I think is why we're talking about this, because there are so many things that we can do to put aside the awkwardness that can happen in tours, the salesy stuff that we maybe aren't so great at or find ourselves really uncomfortable in. And then you can focus on that, relationship building and talk about the really neat things that are happening in the classroom, and ask questions to your people that you're touring with. What was your childhood like? And did notice that the teacher is not in front of the room speaking to a big group of children. She or he is moving throughout the classroom, and each child is doing their own thing. Was that your educational experience as a child? And so you can have those more meaningful conversations and not the conversations around like, here's our tuition, here's the admissions process, here's that stuff, that can be done prior to your tour. And then you can really build that relationship.
Absolutely. I love what you just said about asking questions. One of the things that Matt does that's brilliant is he gives parents example questions. And it's, it sounds a little, I don't know, like we're hand-holding too much, but it lets them know that there really is no such thing as a stupid question because that's something everybody's afraid of, especially in new environments. Montessori is so intimidating. I remember when I toured my son's school, I was so I felt ill-equipped. You know what I mean? I'm like I'm watching just something that was above my ability to comprehend. And it was intimidating. And I'm not a shy person, so I can imagine that like a really shy introverted person is going to walk around and just say, I don't even know where to begin. And so Matt will say, hey, here's some example questions we've been asking in the past. And it lets people know that, I can just pick up one of these materials and ask about that. And that's okay. I love engaging them on a question basis. I also think that it's important talking about making sure that we're bringing in qualified prospects, just taking one step earlier. I'd like to talk about 2 failures that Nito Marketing has had recently. So in our 4th plane, we do Google Ads management for people. And we have yet to have a client who Google did not work for, which is something that is really important to me because it's one of our most important service offerings. And I'm not trying to sell the 4th plane right now, by the way. I'm just trying to make a point. Well, we had 2 clients recently where Google wasn't working, and it was nerve-wracking because we were losing. And when we dug into it, one of our 4th plane members, we were marketing private schools was the phrase. And that's what we had been directed to focus on most heavily. because that's what the member felt was going to resonate the most with her prospects, because she knew her avatar really well. Well, what we found out was private schools was nowhere on our website. She didn't speak at all to private schools. Really, it was all, Montessori based. And then in the post nurture, it didn't speak to private schools. So now all of a sudden we're saying, hey, come in for a private school. And then we land you in this place where we're completely shifting narratives. So when that person comes in for a tour, even if they do come in for a tour, they're not that Montessori isn't a private school, but just that those two narratives aren't connected. So they are now disassociated between what it is that they looked for and what it is that you're offering. So if you're bidding on something like private schools, for instance, or nannies, you need to connect those dots and in very simple terms walk people through what it is that they're doing and why they're there, why you've been able to maintain continuity with that search pattern. The other example I'll offer is we had a member, again, her campaign was failing and we dug into it. It was just in the first 30 days, but we looked into what was happening, and much higher level programs. And we all felt, actually, she did and we did, that people probably weren't searching for Montessori middle school, Montessori high school. Well, we started bidding on it, and bam, lo and behold, they were. And we were able to turn the campaign around almost immediately. But again, it sort of, to answer your question, Deneen, and I'm trying to connect this back, when it comes to making sure that the people that come into our school are appropriate, you have to look at the entire scope. What are you saying on your website? What are you saying in your ads? What are you saying in your emails? Does that messaging match up, and does it match to what you're saying when they get to your classroom? Because if you wrote your email nurture 2 years ago, it might be worth going back and looking at and realizing, gosh, this is what I'm preparing them for. And then they're coming into my tour and I'm not talking about any of that. So just make sure you have that scope in view, because we get so used to what we know and we get so comfortable in our towers of intelligence, that we don't often realize that, they're starting ground floor. And the tour becomes rote and routine to you, but this is the first time this parent is ever going to see it. So if you want the parent to be mission appropriate, you need to go down and meet them where they are and make sure that you're the story that you're telling, you're not skipping any steps. Was that too tangential? Did I lose anybody?
No, I think that's great. Do you have any tips that Matt uses to do that? Because I know that he has this incredible negative keyword list, but also key phrases. And I think nanny is one of them. Do you have any tips on what he has done to help that process, to make sure that his narratives are, cohesive and the same?
I do. Matt's the smartest marketer in the world.
That's why
I've learned a lot from him.
Neato marketing exists, right?
Hence why, he's the mastermind behind all this. One of the things that Matt did that I have always known intellectually as a best practice, but we never spent time doing, because it just felt like it was, kind of a waste. It was like lip service to the process. And so he created a custom landing page for every single one of his important ad groups. So he has a landing page per program, which we now do for all of our members. So if you have a primary program and you have an elementary program, that's two different types of traffic. And the catastrophic error, and by the way, this isn't schools that do this. This is agencies. Agencies will just send traffic to your homepage. And it's just like, good luck. You're just throwing them into the deep end, and I hope you can navigate around. It's not fair to do to a prospect who has very specifically articulated what it is that they want. And then you are, haphazardly being like, it's like, have you ever gone to a store and you ask somebody, hey, where is the shampoo? And they don't even look up. They're like, oh, aisle 7 in the back. And there's just something really deflating about that. It's like, no, you need to stand up and you need to walk me over there, because that's customer service. And then I'll buy shampoo and conditioner. But now I don't feel like ever coming back here. That's what we need to do. And so a custom landing page is specific to what it is that they're searching for, and maintaining the continuity of that narrative and maintaining semantic decisions. So semantics are so important. And Montessorians know this, because I noticed that y'all are obsessed with nomenclature to maybe an unhealthy degree. But everybody, the way that people speak and the way that the words we choose to use is an indication of how we choose to think. And there's more data on this from a marketing perspective than I care to mention. But if I use the word daycare, even if I don't mean daycare, and I don't mean daycare, if I use the word daycare, then you need to use the word daycare. And Montessorians hate having the word daycare on their site. Well, guess what? That's how your parent is speaking. And so one of the smartest things that we can do is, if somebody searches for the word daycare and we're bidding on that word, then you hand a landing page that says daycare. Now, you don't have to say we're a good daycare. What you can say is Montessori education, so much more than daycare. But what you have done is you've met me where I am, and now you're bringing me with you. instead of being dismissive of the entire concept of daycare. So maintaining continuity, Matt is so good at that. One of the things that he taught me is he bids on key phrases for people that are searching for nannies. Because if you're looking for a nanny, you are more than likely affluent, can afford what it is that we have to offer, and also want some level and degree of personalized attention. And so then what he'll do is he'll present an entire case. We call it a pivot. We'll present an entire case why going to a Montessori classroom and having this entire ecosystem, this whole world built around your child, it's so much more productive for your son or daughter than a nanny who's just this solo person. No matter how good the nanny is, you don't have the environment, and the environment is such an important part of Montessori. And again, you're meeting them where they are, but then you're bringing them with you, and I think that helps. It helps train a more mission appropriate prospect. You can train your customers to be better customers. We do that at Nido. We do it for anybody who's gone through our onboarding. We're training our members how to engage with us, and it's for their benefit. Like, we're not doing it in, hey, you can only do the things that we want you to do. It's, if you want this to work, here's how to make it work. And I feel like you can do that with your parents, and you can do it so early. The other thing that Matt does, and I'm so sorry I'm talking so much to Nina, I got excited, but the other thing that Matt does that I really love is he starts talking about the kindergarten year before he has sold you on Montessori. And here's why. It's because Matt's so smart. He's data driven, man. He's got it. But he went and he looked and he goes, okay, my cliff is the kindergarten year. I lose a massive number of our students at the kindergarten year, and kindergarten children are hard to replace because they're not as mission appropriate. Because, people coming in tend, and you will know all the stories. I won't talk about it because I don't want to overstep my bounds. But he noticed that he's losing children at the kindergarten year. So he started talking about it as early as is physically possible, which is the moment he speaks to you. And it's smart, it's subtle, it's nuanced. He'll say things like, hey, Montessori is education for life. And we work in what do we call them, 3-year cycles? Did I use the right words?
Yep.
Nomenclature. And we work in 3-year cycles, and this is why that's important. And what he's starting to do is he's starting to subtly plant the seed that, it's a value proposition. We're with you throughout this whole journey. We're a parenting partner, but he's also saying you can't leave at kindergarten. And if you tell me that, 2 weeks from the gate, where I'm already counting on not having to foot the bill for private school and I get to send my kid to my nice public school up the road, I'm going to be less receptive. But if you told me that when my son was 18 months old, in the infant program, and I am now prepped and indoctrinated and I understand the value proposition, that's a really good way to train your prospects. So just going back to, and it all comes down to story. I've said the word narrative maybe 50 times on this webinar. Know the story you're telling and tell the story really well every time. And if you've ever been to a public library, we take my son to Barnes & Noble because every Saturday they do a reading of like a fun book, like The Giving Tree. And you can always tell the employee at Barnes & Noble that's read the book too many times, because they start to just glaze over it and skip, and they're not doing the voices, and they're not engaging, and they're not looking out at the children. And that's more than likely what your tours may look like. You've read The Giving Tree 1,000 times, and at the end it ends up being a stump, and it's kind of sad, and you're sort of sick of it. But if it's the first time I've ever read The Giving Tree, you just stole something from me, because that is such an important story, especially for little ones, and that's how important the tour of your Montessori school is, especially if it's the first Montessori school they're going to encounter. This is the first time they're going to meet a Montessori environment. You have such a responsibility to do it justice. You can't have bad days. You can't be in a bad mood. You can't, psychologically pre-qualify a parent. You came in with ripped jeans. I don't know if you're going to be we just can't do that. We have to really live into this and tell the story and make sure that the story is being told the entire way from start to finish, when they found us all the way through our nurture. And it's not hard. It's not difficult. It's tedious. And that's why Nido exists. We have so much content available. If you're not using our content, by the way, I'm almost tempted to say the word shame on you. We have so much content available at the free level. Don't pay us. We have just our white papers. We have so much there. It's possible. It just requires a little bit of, stick with itness. And that's the end of my soapbox tirade. I'm so sorry. I got excited.
No, can I go back to the kindergarten thing? Because I know a lot of our members face that same issue, because that's school age, right? You've got families that are looking at not paying tuition anymore.
Right.
That's obviously very appealing to them. But if you start talking very early on, like Matt does, and I think a lot of our members do, you get that narrative out there, and then the conversation happens where maybe even the parent mentions, this is what we were thinking for kindergarten. And that could then be a part of the equation when you think about who you're going to offer enrollment to. If you've got a waiting list and they revealed that, and I've actually been in some conversations when I filled in for an admissions director who was on maternity leave, that came out because it was a part of their narrative, where we expect that you're here through the kindergarten year, and if in any way that's not possible, please let us know, because we need to know if that's going to be an issue in the future. And so that then allows you and gives you more information than, surprise, we're not going to be here anymore. And then here you are with 4 or 5 open spots at the kindergarten year, which is not good for the environment, because you don't have your leaders then. You've got like 1 or 2 leaders and then you've got a very young class.
Right.
So I'm happy that you mentioned that, because I think that's so important. And I think a lot of our schools face that.
Well, I think what you just said is brilliant, because I don't know that that's consistent with what I've seen with all of our members. I have seen and heard the "if you choose to stay" narrative more than the "we expect."
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think especially if you're starting early, I know it's scary to do, because you want a student, right? Like, we're trying to grow, but I do believe that your parents are going to respect you more for it, and it helps establish you as a thought leader, which is really important here. This can't be transactional. Montessori education in general can't be transactional. It can't be, when you're not a vending machine. You're a higher level servant. Like a doctor, and you don't want your doctor coming in saying, hey, do you want to take these pills? Because this is what like you want them coming and saying, I expect you to stay on your antibiotics for 6 weeks or whatever, because that's a cycle.
Right.
I don't know anything about antibiotics.
Taking them for 5 days, you need to take them for 15 days, and you can't. If you want the cycle to be finished, you need to go through the whole cycle, and that's exactly what it is for Children's House, because the kindergarten year is the most important. And I know Christy, our content writer, has written some amazing blogs about that. Yep. Because, all the effort that you put in with the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, when they become 5 and 6, that's when everything gels. And it's amazing and it's magical. And of course, as Montessorians, we know that, but we have to make sure that we let the parents know that along the way. Very early on.
Right. And what's nice too is if you plant that seed early on, it becomes an easier thing to hold somebody accountable to. Mm-hmm. If you tell me my son is, let's say he's 2, and you say, hey, we expect you to be here through the kindergarten year, I think a lot of parents, you're not going to get pushback on your earlier age parents, because they're not necessarily thinking that far ahead. It's not as scary. But now that you've planted that seed, it becomes something that they committed to and can live into. And it looks like we have a comment from Emily. Emily wrote,
she uses the word expect.
I use the word expect even when interviewing families. I know that is a deciding factor in offering enrollment, because it is fundamental to the integrity of the program. Sorry, tiny keyboard. That's okay, Emily. Thank you so much for that. I love, and again, it's semantics. It's small verb changes. I love that you use the word expect. We do something similar. We're producing paid leads. We're spending money on Google. Somebody goes to Google and says, Montessori school near me, and then they pick up the phone and call you. We expect that you either answer the phone or you get back to them right away. And we've had, actually not quite as much in the realm of Montessori, but I've had clients in other industries where, you called your leads back tomorrow. They're not leads anymore. They went and this is the day and age of instant gratification. If you didn't answer, they're going to move on to the next one right away. So I think we all need to be better at establishing expectations for our prospects. And, this is a really good one for Montessori schools to establish. I also think, and Deneen, you made me think of this earlier, but I think we need to get really good at note taking. So if you have an inbound lead, and let's say somebody scheduled a tour and you call to follow up, everything they mention to you should go somewhere in a CRM. And it doesn't have to be advanced. It could be like a Google sheet or an Excel file or, a notepad or whatever, but make sure you write things down, because when they come in, subtle things like remembering the names of their children, how old they are, for whatever reason, they casually mention, oh, sorry about the dog in the background. Cairo's, she just had surgery or whatever. And then they come in and you're like, hey, how was Cairo's surgery? That's my dog's name, by the way. There's nothing more important for rapport building than listening to what people are saying and then caring about it later, and I think that sometimes that gets lost on us a little bit too, because we get so obsessed with the process. So adequate note taking. When they come in for the tour, take notes. This was their trepidation. This was their big pain point. This is what they were concerned with. Guess what you could do? Review that 3 years later. When you talk about the kindergarten program again, you get to say, hey, talked about the expectation of the kindergarten program. They committed. The only exception was, the wife might get a big promotion, and if so, they have to leave the city. Now you get to say, hey, Sarah, how's that promotion going? Are you still going to go to San Fran? And she's say, no, we get to stick around. And you're like, awesome, you're going to be here for the kindergarten year, right? And again, just that kind of established ongoing narrative. And it doesn't take, again, it's not hard, it's tedious. But those are the things in life that really pay off. It's like nutrition and exercise. It's not hard, it's tedious. And if we can get good at the tedious things and we can play the Aristotle game where excellence is what we repeatedly do, then I think we're going to see our schools grow by many multiples. That, that 1% improvement every day, that whole Kaizen thing, it really begins to snowball. And we're seeing that with some of our member schools now. Any comments from our participants? We've got quite a few today, which I'm really excited about. Anybody want to say anything? Is this helpful? Are we on the right page? Is there anything else you want us to talk about? I know I should talk less and Deneen should talk more. I think that's clear. I just happen to be the lead management guy today.
No, I always just throw in Montessori stuff. I think, in the end of this, though, it's like all of this work, which you say tedious, but I also think it's super important because we're really honing in on those mission appropriate families. It just makes it so much easier when you're getting to the point of offering enrollment and looking at your classrooms and seeing the composition that you've got in the classroom, seeing what the guides can handle. And if you've got a list of people that you know well and you've asked all these questions and you've done your due diligence, the offer's so easy and the placement is so easy, versus like, I think I'm not really sure about this person, but we have a spot that we have to fill and we're just going to do it. And then you find out later that it really didn't work out so well. What are the things that you could have done differently? And a lot of what we talked about today is just that. So I love this conversation. I think it's super helpful.
I love what you just said too, because you're right. Usually if you kind of have that feeling in the pit of your stomach, there's just very rarely are you positively surprised. Sadly, it's usually like, yeah, I was right about that one. One pro tip that I use, I don't know if this is applicable to the Montessori environment, but at the end of every phone call I have, especially sales calls, at the end of every sales call, I say, for my professional development, and I preface with that, so I want them to know that I'm trying to grow. Like I want them to do me a favor, but if you can do me a favor for my professional development, if you don't mind me asking, how did this go? And is there anything that I could have done better? And a few things happen. One, some people drop epic amounts of gold right into your lap. And I've had people say, to be honest with you, I don't understand any of the acronyms you use. And so it's really hard for me to even really, glean whatever. But they'll tell you, hey, your school is really hard to find. And it's always stuff that, you think to yourself, like, well, that doesn't matter, like your sign is covered by a bush or whatever, but it's something, those little things that you can improve on. So that's number one, is you end up getting a lot of really positive feedback. And then number two is, in the event that the engagement is positive, what I have found is people just tend to reinforce their decision about you. So they've had a positive tour the entire time. And then you turn around and say, hey, how did this tour go? Is there anything you think we could have done better? And then mom and dad get to go, no, this is great. We loved seeing this. We had no diet. And then now they start to tell you what it was that struck them, and you get to go write it down. And they leave having said the positivity that they felt. And there's something about speaking that makes it real. And Emily said, my fear with Calendly was the lack of contact prior. So thanks for the easy fix of contact before visit. Yes, and actually Calendly, interestingly, decreases the amount of no-shows. It doesn't increase. Matt saw more no-shows because he saw so many more tours. But we've seen over and over and over again with schools that Calendly, because of the process and the fact that it drops into people's calendar, it's actually been more effective at increasing people showing up.
Melissa has taken some of our advice. I like this.
Yeah. So this is the one we get fought on most often. Do you want to read it, Deneen? You take it. Run with it, please.
She said, we recently gated our tuition, so now we get more inquiries that we captured their emails from, and now we need to work on our email nurture so we can email out tuition schedule because the inquiries were a little overwhelming. Wondering if we should call after emailing tuition fees.
So Matt and I disagree, which means that Matt is right. Matt says no. Matt says that it's too early. And by the way, David at Acton Academy shared his nurture with us, and it's amazing. I believe that he and his wife Nicole wrote it together.
Nicole's on this call, by the way. She says thank you.
Oh, hey, awesome. Yeah, Nicole. So if you have an opportunity to look at I don't forget what was it? When was it? 2 weeks ago?
Yep.
Look at David's coaching call, because we have a link to their nurture that you can look at if you have any interest. I believe that you can follow up with tuition requests. Here's how I think you do that, though. you can call and say, hey, I noticed you just downloaded tuition. Thank you so much. I just wanted to see if you had any questions about Montessori. There's so many like misnomers that, you know, we really feel responsible for you know, taking ownership of that narrative. Is there any questions I can help answer? And so instantly it's like, I'm not calling to sell you. I'm not trying to get you into my school. I want to make sure that you understand this thing that's bigger than me. It's bigger than my school. It's bigger than everything. It's the most important thing from a paradigm perspective about what it is that we're doing. And I think if you do that, it starts a really great consultative conversation. I don't think you can call and say, hey, do you want to come in? And I wouldn't say, hey, do you have any questions about tuition? I would say, you know, now that you're here, you're examining Montessori seriously. Do you have any questions about Montessori specifically? Because there are a lot of, you know, misnomers, and I don't know what the word is, but people misunderstand it, and people say things that aren't necessarily true. So that's how I would follow up with tuition. Matt doesn't do it because Matt gets 50 a day or something absurd. So the bandwidth isn't there. But I also think that he feels that it might be a little preemptive. You know, you might turn people off in their search. Deneen, do you have an opinion?
Well, I'd be curious to know how many that download or request tuition actually schedule tours, like what the percentage is.
Mm-hmm.
Because then, you know, if the percentage is something overwhelming like 70 or 80, then maybe following up after they schedule the tour. But if it's like 10%, then maybe there could be a strategic follow-up there.
You're so smart. That should have been my answer. That's the data-driven answer. I would make sure that your tuition download request nurture results in a tour offer. But like you just said, so if I download the tuition, the very next page should be, hey, you know, now that you download the tuition, come in and see it for yourself. And then the follow-up email should be, hey, and then you should hit them a couple of times too with follow-up emails. And don't just say, hey, do you want to schedule a tour? Provide value. You know, check out this Montessori material and how it teaches children the Pythagorean theorem. By the way, do you want to come in and see it for yourself? Like you need to see it, feel it, touch it. And Emily's asking, sorry, Deneen?
And almost like justifying your tuition rates, right? Like,
yes.
And just, again, adding value. Maybe not speaking specifically to why your tuition is what it is, but, you know, they're going to have a number in mind and they're going to want to know why you're either more expensive or just as expensive as the other school down the street, or even less expensive. So just, again, accentuating the value that you offer, I think is helpful.
Yes, well, especially for the earlier programs, you're not daycare. Montessori is not daycare, and it's so obvious when you're in the environment. You go, okay, I get this. But if I just downloaded your tuition and I see your double kinder care, I do need to understand more about it. You're absolutely right. So if somebody downloads tuition, this just goes back to email nurture. Always, always, always have a nurture. You get an email, nurture. And don't ever think that you're bugging people. You're helping them. This is your responsibility. You have a responsibility to communicate to them because you have education that will change their child's life. And the alternative to that is them in a, you know, Clorox cleanup box playing with Legos all day. Like it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we arm them with the information necessary to make the right decision. And Emily, gating just means that you put a form in front of them. So if they want your tuition rates, they have to give you your name and email. Quite a few of our members fight us on this because it feels a little like salesy maybe, but it's been the most powerful lead magnet that we offer. So if you go to Matt's site, if you go to Bergamo Montessori, you'll see that he gates the tuition. So you have to fill out your name, your phone number, your email address. You have to tell him what program you're interested in and what location you're interested in. And then he will email you the tuition rates. And then you get dropped into an automated email nurture that walks you through some processes. It's worth testing. I don't know that we want everybody to test it all the time because we're going to muddy up Matt's. Maybe I should have said that. I'll edit that out of the video later. And then Tracy says, what's your opinion on bringing children on tour? Deneen, I don't have one. I think that's yours.
So I do. Yeah, I've actually had both, parents bring children on tours and parents who have not. And I heavily lean towards not. And the reason is that when I was on tours with parents and children, it was the parents were, 1 foot in, 1 foot out, just like moms, like when you're a mom of like a 2-year-old and you're having a conversation with your friend, you're really not fully listening because you're making sure that your 2-year-old is not climbing on something. It's similar when you have a child on the tour, the parent is wanting to know how the child is taking in the environment and the process and the tour, and they're not truly listening and engaged with what you're offering them. So you're kind of fielding two different perspectives along the tour. So I highly recommend not having parents bring in their children and make that very clear clear before they even come, because it can get very awkward if they do bring their child when you've asked them 3 or 4 times not to. So even, if I get on the phone with them, I always remind them. With that being said, too, if you can, offer an opportunity for them to bring their child in. So when I was doing this, we had open houses and it was family friendly. So that was another way where I could say, it's parent only observation and tours. But 2 weeks from now, we have a family friendly event. It's an open house. Feel free to bring your child, your husband, cousins, everybody, so you can take a look at our school and engage with our guides that way. But this tour and observation is parent only, and people are usually pretty receptive to that.
That's great advice. Emily said, I respectfully request families secure alternative childcare during visits and observations. I do this up front, which is great to know. And it's everything's going to be different for every school. Yeah. How are we doing, participants? Any other questions, comments, concerns, confessions? While you're typing furiously, we have some guest speakers coming, some that I'm really excited about. And if you have anybody you want us to have on the coaching calls, please let us know. If you want to be on the coaching calls, please let us know. We want to hear from our members. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm a thought leader, here's everything that I do. It can be, hey, here's what I'm struggling with. Like, those conversations, I think, might be the most valuable conversations we can have, because if you're willing to be put in the hot seat a little bit and, put your skunks on the table and be a little vulnerable, I think you can just help so many people. So if you're interested, reach out. Nicole said, I've got a bunch of great nuggets from this conversation, so thank you. That's awesome. That makes me happy.
Yeah, we have some really great topics coming up. One especially, because I had a couple conversations with our members about keeping quality staff, because we all, have to deal with turnover and, your amazing guide moves or something happens where you're constantly replacing an assistant. So we're going to have somebody come on and talk about that. I'm hoping to get some people on to talk about parent education topics and how to make parent ed more engaging and more accessible. So there's all sorts of really cool topics that we can talk about. So feel free to join us on this.
Oh, and Deneen and I both are going to be in Washington, D.C. for the AMS conference. And so, first of all, you have to come to the booth and make it look busy for us, which would be really helpful. And also, don't feel like, left out or lonely or anything. But we're just going to be there and we're going to be hanging out. So if anybody wants to come and hang out and we can grab a drink later or coffee or whatever, we'd love to meet our members. I think it'd be great to put some faces to names and emails.
Great. Perfect.
Awesome. This one went long. I like that, though. We've got an hour reserved, so everybody knows. We try to keep them to a half hour, but if they need more time, then we let them bleed into more time. Hey, we're going to meet Emily in DC. That's great. That's exciting. Yeah. Do we know what next week's topic is?
Have we decided yet? I hope you can still hear me.
Yeah, I've got you. You froze for a moment.
Okay, good.
Deneen, do we know what next week's topic is? Have we decided yet?
Okay. Are we still live?
Yeah, still live. Can you hear me, though? I don't know if you can hear me.
Okay.
Oh, I think I lost you. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much for coming. And you're all awesome. And we'll see you next Thursday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific, 1:30 p.m. Eastern. And we will email you once we know what the topic is.
Perfect.
All right.
Have a good week, everyone.